I sensed something was wrong the second I set foot in that house. It was a crisp evening, and the wind carried a chill that prickled the back of my neck. Even before I unloaded the first box from my trunk, I caught a glimpse of a tall silhouette behind the fence next door. A single outdoor bulb overhead flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the yard. Somehow those shadows felt like they were reaching out, ready to wrap around my ankles. I shuddered, turning my attention to the woman I had come here to help. She was determined to settle into this new place, despite the creeping unease that seemed to cling to every corner of the property. I'd promised her I would stay for a while, just until she got comfortable in her new home. As we unpacked the last of the kitchenware, I noticed how she kept glancing at the window overlooking the neighbor's yard. When I finally asked if everything was okay, she said she'd heard him sharpening metal the night before. She explained that the neighbor was polite, but oddly insistent about showing her his knife and sword collection. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was just eccentric. But a part of me couldn't shake the image of him standing in the darkness, watching us. That night, I struggled to sleep. The house was too quiet, the windows too thin, letting every outside murmur drift inside like a whisper in my ear. Around midnight, I heard it, a slow, metallic scraping, as if someone was dragging a heavy blade along the concrete. My heart slammed into my ribs, each beat a thunderous warning. I stared at the ceiling, every muscle tense. The sound stopped as abruptly as it started, leaving only the pulsing echo in my ears and the rush of blood behind my eyes. In the morning, the woman told me her gate had fresh scratches on it. She showed me the gouges in the wood, long and ragged, like someone had been testing a knife's edge. She said the neighbor claimed he had nothing to do with it. In a low, uneasy tone, she recalled how he had given her a tour of his living room earlier. Rows of blades mounted on the walls, gleaming under dull lamplight. He'd barely let her speak, so enthusiastic was he about the craftsmanship, the weight, the history behind each piece. She'd felt a knot of discomfort in her stomach, like she was trapped in a small cage with an excitable predator. I tried to dismiss the scratches as vandalism, suggesting maybe local troublemakers or some random intruder. But deep down, anxiety latched onto my thoughts. That night, the metallic scraping returned, closer this time. The sound sliced through the silence, made my breath catch in my throat. I peered through the window, pressing my face to the cold glass. The neighbor's lights were on, and I could see a giant silhouette waving something long and sharp in the air. My fingers trembled against the windowsill as I watched. I couldn't tell if it was a sword or some twisted piece of metal he was brandishing. Over the following days, my nerves frayed further. I felt constantly watched. The woman sensed it too. She confided in me, describing how she thought she saw someone following her when she walked to her car. A faint clink of metal against the pavement echoing behind her. She hurried inside, heart pounding, half convinced she was imagining things. Yet each time she looked over her shoulder, she caught a fleeting movement in the corner of her vision. The neighbor's eyes appeared in her mind, a lingering stare that felt too intense, too eager. My paranoia grew worse at night. I paced through the dark house, flinching at every creak of the floorboards. My palms were always damp, and my mouth felt as dry as dust. I kept thinking I heard footsteps outside, the faint scraping that made my hair stand on end. Shadows drifted across the windows, elongated and inhuman, warping under the flicker of street lamps. The walls seemed to close in, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. One evening, I caught a glimpse of a figure in the hallway mirror behind me. My pulse spiked, and I whirled around, convinced someone was in the house. But there was no one. I almost laughed at my own reflection, heart hammering in my chest, sweat beading on my forehead. I remembered reading about how prolonged stress can cause mild hallucinations, yet something about the reflection felt off, like it lingered a second too long, twisting a grin that wasn't mine. The woman decided she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to confront the neighbor, to tell him to keep his distance. I offered to go in her place, to speak to him calmly. When I went next door, he answered with a pleasant smile, insisting that he meant no harm. He spoke about his collection in a gentle tone, saying he simply enjoyed the artistry of blades, the thrill of restoring antiques. His politeness unnerved me more than open hostility ever could. There was a glimmer in his eyes that made my stomach knot. Despite his assurances, the eerie nighttime noises got worse. The scraping became a metallic song of dread, a relentless reminder of something sharp waiting just beyond the threshold. I started sleeping on the couch with a flashlight at hand, waking up gasping from nightmares I couldn't fully remember. In those dreams, the walls dripped with shadows, shaped like twisted swords, and I heard an echoing clang, again and again, like a heartbeat made of steel. On my final night there, I could barely stand the tension. My chest felt tight, and my breath came in ragged bursts. I couldn't escape the sensation of eyes in every dark corner, blades hidden in every glint of moonlight. A crashing sound from the backyard jolted me upright. Racing outside with the flashlight, I found the gate swung open, scratched deeper than before, as though carved by a furious hand. No one was there, but I heard the neighbor's door slam shut. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it might burst from my chest. At dawn, I decided I had to leave. The woman and I exchanged tense looks, neither of us entirely sure if we were running from a real threat or from our own unhinged imaginations. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw a tall figure standing in the middle of the street, dragging a blade across the asphalt behind him. Then the glare of the rising sun blinded me, forcing my eyes back to the road. Even as I pressed the accelerator, an invisible weight settled in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how far we went, something far more sinister than a simple sword collector lurked in that neighborhood, something that might follow us, scraping metal and carving fear into the edges of our lives long after we'd gone. I felt it before I heard it. The creeping dread, like a chill crawling along the back of my neck. It didn't matter that the sun was already peeking through the blinds of my small bedroom. The memory of last night weighed on me like a dark presence, and my heart pounded with an intensity that made my ribs ache. I couldn't remember most of what happened, but the odd fragments that lingered were enough to set my nerves on edge. The flickering lights on the school's rooftop, a sudden rush of cold air, the echo of a girl's scream. I woke up disoriented, fighting the sensation that something unnatural had settled into the corners of my mind. I was part of that group of friends who decided to keep the celebration going after our graduation party. The official event had ended hours earlier, but we were too restless to go home. Someone suggested sneaking onto the terrace of the closed school with a few bottles. My memories of arriving there are sharp. The school hallways were silent except for our hushed laughter. It felt like trespassing in our own territory, a place we had inhabited every day for years, now eerily vacant under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. I recall noticing how stale the air felt, as though the building itself had gone to sleep, but resented our intrusion. We made our way up the poorly lit stairwell, giddy from the drinks and our own audacity. On the rooftop, we found an old maintenance closet filled with dusty chairs and abandoned supplies. That's where we discovered the strange bottle, sitting alone on a broken shelf. It had a label so faded, I couldn't make out the words. There was a sense among us, unspoken at first, that the bottle felt out of place, as if it had been waiting for someone to notice it. One of my friends mentioned offhand that we should open it, see if there was something inside. Another friend said we might be inviting trouble, that it looked like an antique or maybe some weird relic. I remember feeling a prick of apprehension, but I said nothing. When the cork popped, I expected a hiss of gas, or at least a whiff of stale liquor, but there was nothing. It was completely empty, bone dry. Disappointment swept through the group. No hidden stash, no exotic drink. But then the overhead security lamps began to flicker in a rhythmic pulse that made my eyes strain to focus. In that brief, strobing darkness, one of the girls let out a sharp cry. She insisted she felt a blast of icy wind rush past her. My skin bristled with goosebumps, not because I believed in ghosts, but because her tone was so urgent. Still, everyone laughed it off after the light steadied. They joked that she was just spooked by the eerie setting, or had had too much to drink. I tried to join their laughter, even though my heart thumped erratically. Now, sitting on the edge of my bed the next morning, I realized that my recollection of the rooftop ends abruptly after that bottle was opened. Everything else is a haze. My head throbs as I stand up, blood rushing to my temples, and I feel a clench in my gut that's more than a simple hangover. I try to piece together how I got home, but it's like chasing shadows. My phone is still plugged into its charger, and there are no new texts from my friends. No jokes, no pictures from the night, nothing to confirm or deny the dim impressions swirling in my mind. I shower in a desperate attempt to clear my head. The water is hot against my skin, but I can't shake the cold feeling that something intangible is hovering behind me. Each time I shut my eyes, I get a flash of that rooftop, flickering lights, the open bottle, and the sense that I was being watched. Afterward, I put on my headphones, hoping some music will help me focus. But before I even press play, I hear it. Faint whispers, like a soft exhalation near my ear. My blood runs cold, and I yank the headphones off. My fingers tremble, and my breath quickens. At first, I think it must be interference or a glitch, but the sound was unmistakably human. Low, feminine laughter, followed by a single, drawn-out sigh. I convince myself it's just leftover paranoia, so I decide to see if any of the others are experiencing something similar. When I call one friend, I try to sound casual, asking how he's feeling. He mentions a slight headache, but nothing else. There's no mention of odd noises. He says some of the group found the whole rooftop episode hilarious, especially the part where the girl panicked. Nobody seems to share my confusion or half-missing memory. The day drags on in a surreal blur. Each time I try to relax with music, the same hushed laughter and slow exhalations creep through my headphones. My heart hammers in my chest so hard, it becomes difficult to breathe. My palms are slick with sweat, and my spine tingles as if cold fingers are brushing against it. I begin to suspect my mind is playing tricks on me, so I switch to using speakers. But the whispers persist, now emanating from the corners of the room with no clear source. The walls feel too close, the air too thick. Night arrives, and sleep is out of the question. My chest tightens with mounting dread. Every shadow in my apartment seems elongated, as though something is lurking just beyond my vision. The overhead light flickers once, causing me to freeze. My pulse races, and a sheen of cold sweat breaks across my forehead. I sense movement in the mirror's reflection, but when I turn, there's nothing. I remind myself that I'm stressed, that I didn't get enough rest, that these illusions could be the product of exhaustion and guilt. Yet the laughter doesn't stop. It taunts me, coming through any device that should be silent. My phone rings unexpectedly, but when I answer, I only hear static, laced with a distant, breathy moan. A wave of nausea grips me. My knees feel weak. I struggle to keep my thoughts coherent. Images of the old bottle flash through my head. How it seemed intentionally placed in that closet. How the label was deliberately obscured. How the lights flickered in a way that felt more malicious than coincidental. By the time dawn breaks again, I realize I can't face another day of uncertainty. I return to the school, slipping through a side entrance, left unlocked by a careless janitor. My chest is tight, and every step echoes in the silent corridors. Up on the terrace, the same maintenance closet stands in its neglected corner, but the bottle is gone. In its place is a subtle darkness that seems to reach out toward me. My lungs constrict as though the very air wants to choke me. I decide to stand my ground, my body trembling uncontrollably. The overhead lamp flickers once more, and I brace myself, breathing in shallow, frantic gasps. In that wavering light, I sense a figure behind me, a presence too close to be comfortable. My heart slams against my ribs. I feel cold breath on my neck, and the same quiet laughter echoes in my ears. No devices required. For one terrifying second, I see a shape reflected in the dusty window, a blurred feminine silhouette. My vision swims, and I steady myself against the wall, certain that if I look away, I'll lose my grip on sanity forever. Then, just as quickly as it began, the flicker stops, and the presence recedes. The silence is deafening, broken only by my ragged breathing. My skin is damp with sweat, and my limbs feel like they're made of lead. I realize then that I'm alone again, but it doesn't feel like triumph. It feels like a warning. I stagger to the stairwell, every hair on my body standing on end, convinced that whatever was in that bottle didn't simply vanish. It attached itself to me, leaving a lingering promise of its return whenever darkness and silence converge. Even as I emerge into the early morning light, I can't dispel the sense of being followed. My pulse remains thunderous, and my breath is uneven. That laughter, it's imprinted in my memory now, an echo that will haunt every moment of quiet. I might have left the terrace behind, but I know deep in my bones that the entity is not finished with me, and I doubt it ever will be. I felt the unease settle in the moment I stepped outside and breathed the cool night air. The moon was little more than a pale sliver, half hidden by clouds that glowed with a sickly light. The gravel under my shoes crunched in a way that sounded louder than normal, too sharp in the silence. When I got into my car, the sudden hush inside felt claustrophobic, like the entire world had shrunk. This oppressive quiet followed me as I started the engine and eased onto the rural road, the headlights carving a narrow path through the darkness. I had just left a small get-together thrown by some longtime friends. They had teased me for always being the first to leave, but I needed an early start the next day. Their jokes had only mildly stung. My nerves were on edge all evening. Something about that night felt wrong, as though every laugh or casual remark was forced. Driving away, I kept replaying the party in my head, scanning for a reason behind my anxiety, but I found none. It lingered, crawling under my skin like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. Once I cleared the few scattered houses, the road stretched into open farmland, only occasionally punctuated by looming trees that formed twisted silhouettes in my headlights. I noticed the bare branches seemed to reach out with gnarled fingers, as though trying to snatch my car off the road. My heart pounded harder whenever I drove under a particularly thick canopy of leaves, the gloom pressing in, my peripheral vision flickering with shadows. I turned on the radio to break the silence, but the static made me more uneasy, so I shut it off. Every bump in the asphalt made my seat shake, and I felt each vibration travel up my spine, tensing my shoulders until they practically touched my ears. I tried to calm myself by recalling the conversation from earlier in the night. Someone had said something about local legends, figures wandering at the edge of the fields after midnight. I remember them implying it was all superstition, meant to scare travelers into slowing down on these winding roads. Still, I couldn't stop looking at the side mirrors, half expecting to see a shape trailing me. My throat felt dry, and I swallowed repeatedly, but the knot in my stomach only grew tighter. Far ahead, the asphalt seemed to vanish into an inky void. I exhaled, telling myself I was being dramatic. Just as I started to relax, I spotted movement on the shoulder about 50 yards away. A figure dressed in pale clothing appeared to be standing by the roadside, arm raised as though flagging me down. A strange jolt of adrenaline shot through me. My pulse quickened, and a clammy sweat broke out across my forehead. I eased off the accelerator, squinting to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The figure remained still, its face unclear in the dim glow of my headlights. Concerned someone might be in trouble, I pulled over. My heart pounded like a hammer in my chest as I rolled down the window and called out, but my voice sounded thin and shaky. The wind rustled the tall grass, offering no reply. With my car idling, I stepped out, leaving the engine running for a sense of safety. I scanned the shoulder and the field beyond, but saw no trace of the figure. The night was too dark to see far, but there was absolutely no movement apart from the wind-rippled crops. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A surge of cold, nauseating dread coursed through my veins. My hands trembled, and my breathing grew rapid and shallow. Fighting the urge to bolt, I walked a few steps to the spot where the figure had been. There were no footprints, no signs of anyone. My shoes sank slightly in the soft dirt, and I noticed my pulse thrumming in my temples. I had this maddening notion I was being watched. It felt as if something loomed in my blind spot, waiting for me to turn so it could slip away. I forced myself to keep scanning the darkness until the fear became too strong to bear. I rushed back to my car, yanking open the door and jumping into the driver's seat. The interior light felt glaringly bright, and I slammed the door, heart pounding so hard my vision pulsed at the edges. I tried to steady my breathing. Then, a subtle weight shift in the back seat sent an electric jolt through my body. Panic seized me. My throat constricted, and I couldn't move, as though an invisible force pinned me to my seat. The sensation lasted a few endless seconds. My breathing grew ragged, each gulp of air accompanied by a cold wave of terror. A low groan echoed from the back, barely audible, but it was enough to freeze my blood. Slowly, I reached for the dashboard, my hand shaking uncontrollably. Flicking on the overhead light made the interior glow, and for a moment, I expected to see a figure hunched behind me. There was nothing. The seat was empty, but the air felt colder than before, almost damp. My heart thundered, and my forehead gleamed with sweat. Another soft moan crawled up my spine, and I realized I wasn't imagining it. The sound was real, somewhere in the car with me. The primal part of my brain screamed to run, but the rational part insisted I check the back seat again. I glanced in the rearview mirror, my breath hitching in my throat. There was a distortion, like the reflection was warping, twisting behind me. I couldn't see a face, only a vague blur, a pallid outline that seemed to flicker like a candle flame. Desperate, I fumbled for the headlights and switched on the high beams, flooding the road ahead with bright, searing illumination. In the mirror, the shape vanished instantly, as if scorched by the light. My entire body shook, and the tension in my muscles was so intense that pain radiated through my arms. I remained immobilized for a moment, half believing I was in the throes of some waking nightmare. After a long silence, I forced myself to drive. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, I feared the leather might tear. The next stretch of road felt interminable, my eyes darting from side to side, convinced the figure might reappear at any second. I kept checking the back seat, my heart skipping with every soft creak of the car's frame. Each time I glanced in the mirror, my pulse spiked, but there was no sign of that pallid presence. Eventually, I reached the main highway, where sparse streetlights created islands of orange glow on the asphalt. I pulled into a gas station, which was empty except for a single lit pump. I cut the engine and just sat there, hands shaking, trying to make sense of what happened. My stomach churned, and I thought I might be sick. I replayed the events again and again, but each time, logic dissolved, giving way to a dread that I couldn't banish. I'm not sure how long I sat there, staring at my own reflection in the windshield, searching for signs of madness in my eyes. Every nerve in my body felt raw, as though I had narrowly escaped something impossible to define. Even in the artificially lit station, the shadows on the pavement seemed unnaturally long, reaching toward me like silent witnesses to the nightmare. My breathing remained shallow, and sweat clung to my skin despite the cool night air. That night, I finally drove home under the fluorescent haze of the highway lights, glancing over my shoulder every so often. My imagination conjured half-seen forms just beyond the reach of my mirrors, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was never truly alone in that car. The memory of that moan lingered, echoing in the dark corners of my mind. Even after I locked my door behind me, the silence of my apartment felt charged with a sinister presence, as if something had followed me. Although I couldn't prove it, I sensed that the boundaries between reality and nightmare had blurred, and I'd stepped into a space I was never meant to enter. I did escape that road, but I'm still haunted by what I experienced. That fleeting glimpse of a pale figure and the insidious weight behind me in the back seat left a permanent imprint on my psyche. Even now, my heart races whenever I drive alone at night, especially on deserted roads. I can't dismiss it as a trick of the light or a stress-induced hallucination. Some things defy explanation, and sometimes it's best not to look too closely.